Welcome to the Just Ask podcast, exploring the secrets to a healthier, happier, and more connected marriage. I'm Becky Bridgham.
And I'm Jim Bridgham.
And we're your hosts on this journey.
Whether you're navigating the joys and challenges of married life, raising a family, or striving for better health and fitness, you've come to the right place. We're here to provide you with the guidance, insights, and tips you need to create a thriving partnership.
But what makes our podcast unique? Well, we're not just here to share our own experiences, we're here to answer your burning questions. Each week, we'll dive into the topics that matter most to you.
So remember, Just Ask isn't just a name, it's also an invitation. We want to hear from you. If you've got a question about relationships, family dynamics, or how to stay fit together as a couple, don't hesitate to reach out. Drop us a line through the website or social media, and we might even feature your question in an upcoming episode.
And to make sure you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe. We'll be coming to you every week, and trust us, you won't want to miss a single episode.
So we'll dive in. Grab your favorite beverage, cozy up, and let's look into the wonderful world of marriage, family, and fitness, and we'll do it together. You've got questions, we've got answers. This is Just Ask, the podcast for couples seeking happiness, health, and harmony. Let's go. Hey everybody, thanks for joining us this week. We're going to be talking about managing stress and burnout in parenthood. Now, if you don't have kids, that's okay. Stick with us because I think these burnout tips will apply in a host of areas. But what is this? What does it mean to be burned out as a parent? And some of you who are seasoned parents might be laughing by that very question. But as you get to the end of your rope, you're just totally done. You're exhausted in every possible way. And what happens is we have a lot of demands on our bodies and our time, especially as parents. If you're one that works and then you also have your child, you're dealing with child care. That's stress in itself. Or let's say you're a full-time parent at home. It's honestly repetitive over and over again, the same demands. Those things create an incredible amount of burnout. Burnout can affect you physically, so you're just tired. You just feel run down and exhausted. You can also have emotional burnout. So emotional burnout's really fun because it's like all of a sudden you have somebody coming at you, like your kids need help and assistance, and you're just like, I just don't care. Like it's like that. And sometimes you can get like that. I know we've had. It's funny, one of the conversations with a child who is at home, so that narrows it down, I guess. But I've asked the last few weeks, I've been pushing to try to kind of just create more closeness as a family. It's one of my goals this year. So I've asked, like, hey, how's it going? And like, I'm busy. Okay. And like, how's it going today? Like every day, these kind of one-word conversations. And then I make a joke about it. So I'm like, ooh, I love our deep conversations. Fast forward to today. Same child comes out and says, well, you guys never spend time with me. And mm-hmm. And I'm just sitting there true story. Becky's there watching. I go, do you mean like the 15 times I've asked you this week, how are you doing? Well, that's different. You just never want to engage. I'm like, you mean like when I try to talk to you? But so that can lead to pressure and stress. And if you're someone trying to be a good parent, but then you're managing work or school or other kids or dogs, it creates stress and burnout. So beyond emotional piece, it can also create mental exhaustion. If you've ever had this point where you're like, maybe I have a brain tumor because I can't remember anything. Mm-hmm. Your brain gets to that point very, very easily because it's exhausted. It's trying to conserve energy. And when it's conserving energy, it's going to cut out all kinds of things. I mean, there are times where I'm like, I don't remember anything. And it's not just because I do have a legitimate disability from my military service, but that aside, this is way worse than that. And it's really just burnout and overwhelm. What does it look like though in reality, right? For a second, then Becky's going to chime in. I know it's like the gym show so far, but that's fine. So physically, it could be headaches. I mentioned tiredness. You'd say fatigue, and then even waking up in the middle of the night, your brain not having full rest. Emotionally, obviously being irritated, which just means having teenagers. You could have anxiety, depression, feeling withdrawn, you're just not yourself is a good way to put it. And really, this has an effect beyond yourself. So if you think you're sucking it up and getting through it, and let's say one week I felt totally burned out and tired. I'm in the midst of my dissertation. We have Sage. We started a nonprofit this year. Becky's doing so much more with her work. There's a lot going on, a lot of pressure. And so I went to the cheese balls. I don't know if that's you, but I've got my giant bucket of cheese balls. And I'm like, man, I'm going to have a bucket of cheese balls. I didn't eat the whole bucket, but let's just say I had a proportion of the bucket or a high level of cheese balls. So that's a way to deal with it. Now, that's not a great way to deal with it, although a delicious way to deal with it. So we're going to go into kind of some more common stressors and then some additional helps to get through this.
Absolutely. And one of the things about talking about this is giving us that self-awareness. I know, I coach people one-on-one, typically through health and fitness, but of course, their whole lives are wrapped up in that. So a lot of times we'll talk about emotions, we'll talk about stress, we'll talk about parenting. And just as Jim was talking, it was this aha moment. I have one client who's just really struggling and getting frustrated with herself because she knows what she should do. She's not necessarily doing it. And just listening to this, like, oh my gosh, she's so burnt out because she's momming, working, husband is deployed. I'm like, of course, now it all makes sense. And so just like I had that aha moment, you might be listening to this and go, oh my gosh, it's not that I'm lazy. It's not that I'm not trying. It's that I'm actually really burnt out. And so this podcast is designed to just give you the awareness and give you some tips. So one of the things to learn is, what are these things that cause burnout? Like, what are the aspects of our life that can lead to this? So common stressors that we have: financial. I feel like everyone I know, probably everyone in the US, I don't know if people around the world, are probably feeling some type of financial stress right now. The economy is not great. Inflation is high. We can go into the reasons why that is. We probably won't. But just know, so you know, you're not alone. If you're having financial stress, you're definitely not alone. And that's something that can cause burnout because it's increasing our stress. It's increasing the need to really pay attention to what we're buying or cut corners. And so it's definitely something that bleeds into that. We actually had one of our kiddos over today, college age, going to college, and we're talking about how a lot of their friends are choosing state schools or choosing community colleges. And I said, just off the cuff, I'm like, I bet that's because people are in a hard financial spot. More people probably now than 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So they're making different decisions. And so that, again, is a common stressor. So if you're dealing with that, you're definitely not alone. Definitely second stressor to think about is that work-life balance. We're all juggling many hats, right? You have your work, you have your community, you have your home, you have your health, you have, your dogs, you have your hobbies. We have a lot going on. All of us do. And again, the more demands on your time, the higher your stress level. But I also want to caveat that not all stress is bad stress. It could be good stress. You could be planning for a vacation or a wedding or remodeling a home. That's a fun stressor, but it's still stress in itself. I was actually just listening to a different podcast today. They were talking about stress and how when they study people who don't have any stress, they find they're not really living very much life. So if you're not having any stress, good or bad, you're probably not doing a whole lot. And that actually made the brain in these case studies, the brain of these people shrink. So again, not all stress is bad stress, but just knowing what are the stressors that really raise up your burnout level. Another one is time management. When you have so many things going on, balancing all those commitments can just lead to a general sense of overwhelm. And then, expectations, whether that's expectations in your home, societal expectations, work expectations. And that sometimes is the pressure put on you from the outside in. We definitely can put a lot of pressure on ourselves internally, but then you might legitimately have a boss from hell that is making you work 14 hours on top of all these other things. And so just knowing that these are the inflows, right? If you think of them as little rivers that are leading to the ocean, some might be bigger than others. Some might be pouring in more than others, but just knowing what they are when we get to the strategies will help us see how can we reduce some of these to help us overcome some of that burnout.
Yeah. So how do you cope? Like, what are some practical ways to cope and manage these things? Some of them are going to seem hard, like I'm adding something to your life. And I know, like, even now with Sage, like some mornings we're getting up and it can be the first 5 minutes of getting out of bed is probably the absolute worst. You're just completely tired, exhausted. It's how we go. So some of these I make recommendations to you, not like ignorant of how this might sound, but I'm telling you they're worth it. So on physical, starting to exercise, okay? Like finding a way to work out. It can be just walking, but exercising. If that means you might have to get up before your kiddo, if you have a little one, or before the teenagers need breakfast or whatever, you got to get up and do it. Making sure you get enough sleep is another thing. I know that could be a joke, like in our case, like right now. I know Becky was up super late, like we just had, sleep's not a great thing. But if you can't sleep in the day, finding a way to do it. Now, that might mean a 10-minute nap. A 10-minute nap might change your life. You might say, I don't have 10 minutes. But if you get a lunch break, can you go to your car and lay down, set an alarm for 10 minutes? Can you do a meditation in your car before you leave work to come home? Can you break away? Finding a 10 minutes is something that could change your life. And really, a nap should not be much longer than that. You might be able to get 20 minutes or whatever, but that's the best, something like that. And of course, proper nutrition, avoiding the cheese balls. Emotionally, like getting the emotions out. Saying that, let's say you're frustrated with your child, but you're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to say it because if I say it, I'll sound judgy. Like, no, we want you to say it. You got to get it out. And if you're not comfortable sharing it with another human, putting it down in a journal or even a verbal journal or something, like get the emotions out, because emotions don't just disappear. They kind of build up in your body. And what you'll find, I do this from like my yoga practice, when we have emotions in certain areas, your body carries it. It's not that every area is directly correlated. It's not like hips are frustrated with your bank account, like not like that. But what it is you'll have like tension and tightness, and your body tightens up when it's stressed out. So keep that in mind, that like if you don't get it out, it's going to show up somewhere. Absolutely. Mentally, any kind of meditation or mindfulness. I can't say enough good things about apps like Calm or Headspace. I personally use Headspace. I love it to death. It's great. Those kind of things are huge. And socially, some kind of supportive group. If you're in a situation where, let's say you are single parenting, and I know plenty of single parenting folks who are men or women, or because of deployment or work, or the spouse is a consultant or deployed, or you name it, or cop, firefighter, all those things. And again, this is both genders. You need a group. I don't care where you find the group. It can be a support group for moms. It can be a dog park. It can be the playground, but finding a group of people that you can talk with it. So how do you make this talk with people about it? So how do you make this happen, right? It's self-care practices need to be part of your routine every single day. And so like I literally have a box check. So on my app, my phone, and then also written, I no kidding have like boxes I check to make sure I'm doing certain things that I know are good for my health, like meditation, journaling, praying, things that you might say those should be obvious. Well, they're not. Like life comes up. And so there's that, and setting goals. So like my goals I set low. So like 3 times a week. I'm not able to get a 10-minute nap or meditation that even 4 some weeks, sometimes not even 3. But with that in mind, the days that I can, you think weekends or whenever are worth it. Saying no and setting boundaries. Okay, so this is something that I've been doing this whole year, and that's my phone is now like anathema. I only check my texts twice a day, sometimes once a day. My phone is off all day Saturday. My phone is no kidding black and white background. I've taken all the steps to make the phone not an attractive device. It's really interesting because when it's like this, and this is just some best practices that are out there, they're all in your accessibility settings, by the way. Your brain doesn't go to it as much because, again, it's like a drug. And I have gotten so much, oh my gosh, my phone time has gone down so much, and I'm getting so much more done. It's crazy. So saying no and setting boundaries that work for you. Not everybody can do that, but if you can, it's huge. And the final thing is like looking at yourself with compassion. You can set all these goals that I just gave. You can have physical goals, mental goals, emotional, spiritual, but what'll happen is you're not going to hit them all the time. I don't hit them all the time. So when we have compassion with ourselves, and say like, hey, we're doing really well for where we're at. Like, let's say that you're dealing with stuff with it, like 2 glasses of wine and some bonbons at night, right? I don't even know what a bonbon is, but I know it's from
uses that
TV.
line all the time.
I do.
I'm like, do you even know what a bonbon is?
It was Married with Children. Anybody from the 80s? Any 80s kids know
gosh.
Married with Children? Anyway, bonbons. But what you'll find is if you get down to 1 glass of wine and 6 bonbons, or wine every other night and 2 bonbons, whatever your thing is, to give yourself compassion and a cheerlead, and to know you're not going to go to like 0 for the long term easily. It takes concerted effort to get there.
I think one of the things that I notated when Jim was talking is we do have these things that, when we're suffering burnout, we're suffering stress, we lean toward. Like for Jim, it's the cheese balls. For me, it's probably the wine. Some people, it's the phone, right? We are so overwhelmed with our normal life. We would rather check out and watch somebody wash dishes on Instagram, or, repurpose old furniture, because it's easy. You don't have to think. It's like that quick dopamine hit that, makes you feel good. But the trick about that is you end up feeling worse after. And that's, studies again will show that when we go to these simple, quick pleasures, these quick fixes to avoid stress, it actually creates more stress in the long run. So just being aware of that. So practical tips for how do we actually, instead of choosing the phone scroll or the wine or the cheese balls, how do we practically reduce some of these areas that are stressing us out? So we did a whole podcast on time management. If that's something that you're really struggling with, I would definitely recommend going back and looking at that. But simple things like prioritizing tasks. And we don't have to get everything done every single day. Most of the time it's not necessary. But what are the things that are most important? And then also feel free to delegate. Again, we have big kids, we have little kids, depending on what your household looks like. Even with your spouse, you don't have to do everything yourself. Hiring help if you can, or just reducing the expectation again for tasks. Creating schedules and creating routines that work for you, for your family. You might, see someone, a neighbor, a sister, a friend, like, oh yeah, they have their morning routine down and this is when they do their grocery shopping. That works for them. You have to find the plan that works for you and for your family. Some people can meal prep on the weekend. Some people know they have sports. They are going to go through a drive-through 3 nights a week after those sports events. Whatever works for you, but having a plan ahead of time makes you feel like you have more control and will reduce some of that stress. It's being proactive rather than reactive. Learning to let go of perfectionism. This is something that I struggled with personally for many, many years. And one of my favorite books is The Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown. Highly recommend. If you find that you are someone who is not just overwhelmed with life, but overwhelmed with getting everything perfect or being seen as perfect, needing that validation from other people, I would highly recommend that book. But letting it go. Honestly, nobody knows if your bed is perfect or your pantry is perfect. I mean, maybe you're sharing pictures of it on Instagram, but in general, nobody really cares. Okay. I hate to say that, but the truth is in 10 years, you're not going to remember that pantry that you saw on Instagram and no one's going to remember yours. So giving up a little bit of that, excuse me, will help with reducing some of the stress. And this is also, like Jim was mentioning, setting realistic expectations and boundaries, realizing what your limitations are. You might not be able to clean the whole house, work full time, manage being the booster mom, plus, organizing your sister's bridal shower. You might not be able to do that, but knowing it ahead of time and choosing where to cut is going to help reduce the stress rather than trying to do it all and then feeling like a failure or literally not being able to complete your tasks, which is going to, increase that burnout. Embrace that flexibility. We need to be able to flex. We're not going to be able to get it all done. And I think one of the things that Jim mentioned that, I will definitely, affirm is saying no. You can say no. No is a great word, just like yes is a great word. But I know in one season of my life personally, when the kids were in school and I was doing PTO and I was, volunteering here and I was teaching classes and I was working part-time, I got to this point where I did everything. Right? I wanted to do everything because it made me feel important. It made me feel validated and, kind of getting to that point of almost like manic saying yes, not out of people pleasing. There's another lane for that. But this was more out of, I needed to feel important. And so I said yes to everything to the point where I was like very much overwhelmed, but almost in this cycle of I couldn't let it go. And then we had some life changes. I'm like, man, I went through therapy, realized all this. I'm like, I no longer need validation of doing everything to feel good. And that's a nice spot to be in. So if you find yourself in that spot where you say yes to everything just because you really want to be seen, you really want to feel important, but it's contributing to that burnout, it's definitely something to talk to someone about. Just sharing that story. Hopefully that helps someone. But again, having the communication, having the self-awareness, not just between, you and say even a therapist, but with your partner. This is all about parenting and overwhelm, feeling like there's so much going on, realizing that you are a team with your partner, having that conversation. We've talked about prior, having weekly meetings where you're going over how things are going. Are you overwhelmed? Am I overwhelmed? I know sometimes she'll be like, oh, you're doing so much. I'm like, I feel pretty good. I don't feel overwhelmed with everything I'm doing. And I'll look at what everything's he's doing. I'm like, are you okay? He's like, no, I'm good. But I think having that communication is important so that you can help each other. Because, sometimes some weeks I might need a little help and some weeks he might need a little help, but we're not going to know that. And just assuming that the other one is okay or assuming that the other one is not okay. How do you know if you don't have that conversation? So definitely, having that communication with your partner, leaning on others when you can, and then also carving out time to not just have self-care, but have care for your relationship. Parenting is hard. I mean, we've had the kids shout out, "I hate you," and we've had the moments where we've, lost our temper, and none of us are perfect. And anyone who portrays that they're perfect is probably lying, because parenting is hard. I mean, you give so much to your children, but you get so much back. But there's moments where you're just tired, you're overwhelmed. And Jim had the analogy of, when you're emotionally drained and you're like, I just don't even care. There's the other side of like where you're so emotionally drained that you're like weeping in the shower because you just can't handle it all. And we have been there. We have all been there. So just hopefully that some of these strategies, self-awareness, some of these tips will help you, if you are there, bring down the stress level to the point where you can enjoy your family more. You can enjoy this season of parenting, because guess what? It goes by so fast. I know we are parenting on both ends of the spectrum, 18-year-old all the way down to a 1-year-old. And I'm telling you, a blink ago, our 18-year-old was that 1-year-old. So it definitely goes by fast. We want to enable you to enjoy the parenting and not be living in that state of burnout.
Yeah. And the final thing is, if you get stuck with any of this and need help, reach out. Or you can reach out to us and we can help direct you to resources. You can go to places at your work, like employee assistance program, counseling, all kinds of things. Always ask for help. So if you're at a point where you're like, I don't know where to start, there's absolutely no shame in doing it. And the great part of it, it's so easy now. Most providers, you can get someone on your phone video. You don't need to go somewhere and make time specifically for it. You can do this at home at all hours, thanks to a host of reasons. So you can do that. It'll be great. But ultimately, it's worth dealing with the stress so that it doesn't get so high that you say something you can't take back. Because one of the things about kids, and this is the hardest thing, this is probably the reason we're really bringing it home, is if you have another adult and you say something inappropriate, I hate you or whatever, it's some negative thing. Ultimately, it can be reconciled. It still might sting for a long time, but it can be reconciled. With a child, if you say something at the wrong age or wrong time, it's the wound of a lifetime. Mm-hmm. It's a parent saying well, you're fat, you're stupid, those kind of things. That gets adopted by the child as their identity. And it's very hard. You can't just come back and say, hey, I'm sorry for what I said. You can do that. Oh, that's great. We're going to all make mistakes. The problem with it, though, is sometimes it's ingested in they don't hear the apology. It's permanently in their mind. So we want to make sure you're prepared before that happens. I hope that's not you. I'm not judging you if you did, because I think all of us say something stupid from time to time. I know I do. But that's it. Always get help. And that's all I got for today.
Hopefully this is helpful. And again, if you all have any topic or question that you would love for us to talk about, please reach out. We definitely are willing to explore anything. We don't have all the answers, but we're willing to go research them and be helpful to you. So we always want to make sure that we are providing value. We really enjoy doing this, and we hope that it's helpful.
Have a great day.